Welcome once again dear friends for the MOOC course of NPTEL on strategic trade and protectionism theory and empirics, where we have already landed in the session on non-tariff barriers. And non-tariff barriers, as I repeatedly said, is one of the most important restrictions or protectionism of international trade transactions. So, we are on 33 lecture of week number 7, where we have been discussing these details. Now, after discussing the types of non-tariff barriers and facts and figures, let us have a detailed understanding of the implications of non-tariff barrier, how it affects and which particular instrument of non-tariff barrier actually affects differently. So, let us count by certain theory or theoretical mapping of effects of non-tariff barriers. Now, this is the one we have already discussed, different types broadly divided into some practices of defense measures and some practices of non-tariff barriers measures. Out of that, import control will be emphasizing largely. Also, we will be discussing export related controls like export subsidies or export related financing, here is also state subsidies, and those other instruments like TBT general space will take off in the next lecture. Now, let us start with import quota, which we started in the previous class, but could not able to do it. What is the meaning of it? How import quota has been conceptualized? The first important discussion of import quota is referred when we have a direct control of imports to the domestic country. It straightway reduce the import to the exact requirement, whereas in the case of tariff we do not have the direct impact. Though the imposition was direct in tariff, but the restriction is not effective. But here the restriction is very effective. Quota means a specified amount of import is permitted to the to the importers to the country. Beyond that, there are strict regulations or strict penalties. On this, therefore, we say it is a direct quantitative restrictions on the amount of commodity which has been imported to the concerned country. And import quotas are used usually to protect domestic industry, specifically agriculture sector, and for balance of payment balance of payment problems as well, to correct the balance of payment problem as well, because it since import bears huge amount of burden on the balance of payment. So, this is one of the direction by which it could able to minimize the imbalances. What about how to differentiate these as against import quota that was discussed in the last week? Large in short will verify, largely in short, there are 2 points by which we say import quota is effective. There are 2 other points where we say import tariff is effective. Now, so far as domestic price is concerned, it increases domestic price higher than that of tariff through import quota, but how? Obvious question comes, why it is higher? So, we will verify now in the next slide. Now, second aspect is it promotes higher production than that of tariff. So, therefore, both way it is very important. So far as import tariff is concerned, it facilitates higher consumption than quota, because even if a price is restricted, importers may import more than that of the the amount being imported as is mentioned in quota. Similarly, it facilitates higher imports than quota. It might facilitate more production. Those are the importers can bear the cost of tariff, can import as much they want. So, there are the broad two differences other are mentioned in our slides. Now, let us do the theoretical mapping or the presentation of these two differences. Now, here we are mentioning a partial equilibrium setup, partial equilibrium partial equilibrium discussion on defining import quota as against tariff, starting with given demand and supply in a particular country at a certain price level 1. Now, these are expressed in dollar, we can express in rupee and any other currencies as well. Now, when the price is prevailed at 1 in the international market, given the production function and the demand pattern within that country, it accrues to huge imports. So, these imports can be restricted by two channels, majorly by important two channels. One is through imposing price on the or tariff on the price of imports, that is one, we can make it to 2 if 100% tariff is imposed, or we can restrict the extent of products imported by the importers by stating the limitations on the import, those are called import quota. So, let us start with the import quota. So, around out of huge percentage of imports, suppose country is interested in importing only 20 to 50, that is 30 units. 30 units is required, beyond that the country is not permitting. So, what really happens if 30 units are imported by the importers now, who has the bargaining power? Now, importers has or usually go by certain bargaining with the exporters sitting in another country, and since now the importer does not have that much of bargaining because of the domestic rules and regulations which restrict the importers not to import beyond that limit, let it be 20 units, 30 units. Now, since less are imported, so given the demand and supply, or since supply is restricted from other countries, the domestic forces will actually lead to higher prices, let it be double by 2, till the level 2. So, due to imports price increases to the level 2. What really happens in this diagram? Here, as I already mentioned, based on the consumer surplus, producer surplus framework, this much, as I told you, under the demand curve, this is a demand curve, under the straight line demand curve or the consumer surplus, and there is a loss of consumer surplus by C. Basically here it is A, M, N. Also there are two this area, this area, this area and this area, all are losses. Out of that, producers are actually getting more incentivized due to the higher prices by the area A. So, A is the area basically here this is the area gets neutralized as an effect to the country's welfare. So, plus A and minus A cancelled out. What is left is actually these three area, this area, this area and this area. Now, these are the negative consequences on the consumers so far as import quota is concerned. Now, it is all about the area highlighted here. Now, there are two channels we must discuss. First, we said this triangle, small triangle plus added with this area plus added with this another triangle is basically on minus terms, alright, minus impact to the country. Now, our concern here is if import quota is freely these rules are freely available and any importers can go for it without any restriction further, then what really happens the competitive competitive firms can able to restrict their import very quickly. Now, if the government follows in two channels that since very limited quantities are imported, very few importers will take the advantage, why not, and they also charge higher prices due to the domestic equilibrium condition. So, why not have a auction on these particular imports? The government instead of free imports, governments goes by auction, leasing of the imports, then that attaches certain premium to the government. So, government earns money, I mean government gets rent out of it. So, government gets rent out of it, and out of the rent government government may do certain things. Now, we will come back to this point again, probably one another point I am missing. At level 2, if the 2 is the price set through tariff, let it be 100% tariff is imposed on the product within the country, and country is a small one, it is not influencing the world prices. If that price prevails within the country, then country can able to at this price, there are certain differences. I mean based on if demand gets changed, then tariff would be different. Let us come back to that. Now, what really happens? We have said that government earns rent and government might go for certain welfare programs with the money earned from the importers. Okay. So, there will be redistribution of money which are earned through the competitive bidding or through some certain kind of import auctions. So, auctions money are redistributed, which has led to higher demand for, I mean demand curve gets shifted due to the external factors. So, demand curve actually there is a possibility of shift since higher income is with the government. So, higher the income with the government, high is the demand curve. Now, given this higher demand due to auctioning of the extent of tariff, extent of import quota, now that has led to higher demand. Now, based on the price, if the price still prevails as 2, now there is higher import from J till K. So, import is actually by tariff, import is not restricted. So, by tariff import is actually higher. So, now suppose we are comparing with tariff, I mean quota, import quota with tariff, then what really happens? The equivalent amount of J to H, that is of 30 units, if it is also restricted through tariff. Okay. So, now since our new demand curve is here and we are going by restricting through tariff, the government has to impose higher prices, higher tariff in order to restrict the tariff units by 25 till 55, it is of 30 units. In order to restrict the import through tariff by 30 units, the extent of tariff is much higher. Now, it has resulted higher prices. So, tariff has caused higher prices, whereas import quota the prices is lower, and given the same prices import quota could able to restrict more trade, whereas export tariff or the import tariff is actually restrict less import. So, therefore, these are the comparisons very important for understanding. As you already said, let us verify once again. So, import quota higher domestic price than tariff. Now, if it is import quota, now in the international level since higher domestic production than tariff because it facilitate production, but higher domestic price than tariff we need to understand carefully. But here it is quite clear due to tariff, it is to have import quota here with by this, not by tariff, to have import quota of the same amount. By tariff it is higher, I mean at 8.2 if we have a tariff it is importing more, but if at a higher quantity through auctioning or through auctioning process, now the price is actually gone up. Now, I mean to have import quota of 30 units again, so our price is actually gone up. So, therefore, here we are saying higher domestic price than tariff in case of import quota. Similarly, I have already clarified the reasoning behind it, some other things can be clarified through this explanation. Import quota involves distribution of import licenses, which I have already said, while tariff does not have any kind of restrictions. So, if not auctioned by government, as I already said, in any competitive markets, the receiving firms will reap monopoly profit. Some of the firms if there is no auctioning of the thing, then probably monopoly profits are also attached, because whoever are competitive one in the market, they can able to import at even higher prices. Allocation decision usually be biased or usually biased due to lobby factor or even arbitrary judgment rather than efficiency concerns. Who are getting the auctions, who are getting the leasing or licenses, and whoever has better lobby. So, therefore, so lobby for licensing set seeking activities are observed. Import quota has replaced market mechanism, which is resulted in waste and possible corruption in the market. So, import quota usually limits the specified level with certainty for sure, it has direct impact, while the trade of an import tariff may be uncertain. Trade might facilitate even more trade even if higher prices is there. It depends upon the elasticity of demand and supply. So, it is very difficult to estimate the exact import tariff which is required to restrict the import to a specified limit. And regarding foreign exporters, exporter who cannot maintain export quantity simply because of adjusting with the barriers by increasing efficiency or accepting lower profits as with tariff. Because of import quota, as is less visible, domestic producers prefer them over tariff, okay, because since that is less visible. And as I already said, tariff usually retaliated if one country, like in the present context, if you go by or go between the lines in the newspaper, daily newspapers, we find there have been constant trade wars between Chinese product and US product. Those are the discussion we already made in the very beginning of our lecture, trade lecture, that was related to trade war between US and China, and similarly trade war between India and China are discussed. Now, so in short, what we wanted to say that since import quota are more restrictive than equivalent import tariff, society should resist domestic producers' effort to use quota instead of tariff, since this is very effective. What are the other channels by which tariffs are made? Channels like voluntary export restraint is one of the channels, those has been already abolished. It is by the importing country induces another nation to reduce its exports voluntarily, the voluntary word was retained, under the threat of higher trade restrictions. Now, country X will request the exporting country not to export. If the exporting country is not still exporting, there might be higher threat in terms of trade restrictions. So, therefore, this is mentioned as a voluntary attempt, and usually called orderly marketing arrangement. It is a strategy in the international market to market the product in the international boundary, and it is very less effective in limiting imports than quotas, because of exporters usually tend to fill the quota with higher quantity and higher price goods over time. Now, the limit here actually the impact lies with I mean the exporting country, what kind of argument extent they are going to accept. So, this was completely phased out by in 1999 as per the discussion in Uruguay round. So, BUR has actually abolished completely voluntary export restraint of Japanese. One such example can be cited here. The Japanese automobile exports to US negotiated in 1981. And US also restrains imports of steel by 20% of the US steel market in 1982. So, price of steel actually gone up in US, and accordingly there are various other effects. So far as technical and administrative barriers are concerned, we have certain health and safety regulations which actually raise the cost of import that usually practiced by the developing countries through the channels called TBTs or SPS. Government also facing purchasing restrictions which may be biased against foreign goods. Rebates for indirect taxes may be given to exporters and impose on importers of a commodity. Similarly, another form of non-tariff measure is due to international cartels. As we said, cartelization or agreement among the countries, secret agreement among the countries can be discussed or would be discussed in the next week. But here we are emphasizing on some examples of cartelization, like OPEC was formed and how it has created the nation not to export, or if they are importing or exporting, they have certain contracts. So, OPEC, as I said, it is organization of petroleum exporting countries, quadrupled the price of crude oil between 73 to 74, since it was formed in 73. They restricted production and exported heavily. Similarly, dumping is another dimension where trade has been restricted. Dumping, the word dump means we, as if we are putting into the waste, but in the international market I mean dump is referred to the context of competition. Some strategies may dump the competition or the strategy of another player, like deliberately setting lower prices in order to catching the market. And many, there are thousands forms of dumping practices or many which are visible, like for example, we can refer Chinese product, IT hardware product in our Indian market. It is actually mushrooming at a very low cost. That does not mean China's products of those variety in China is much cheaper. It is not right. So, basically lowering the cost in the international market is the answer for dumping. So, export of a commodity at below cost or sale of a commodity at a lower price abroad than domestically is called dumping. There are usually 3 types of dumping practice. One is called persistent dumping, sporadic, I mean another is called persistent dumping, then predatory dumping and sporadic dumping. There are 3 types of dumping we usually refer. Persistent dumping are usually discussed as a continuous dumping strategy adopted by the monopolists to maximize total profit by selling their commodity at higher prices in the domestic market. So, in the domestic market the prices are charged at a higher prices, and in the international market the charge is lower. Whereas, in case of predatory dumping, it is a temporary phenomenon and of specific commodities by below their cost of production or lower prices abroad to drive foreign producers out of their business. Then third category is called sporadic dumping, which is usually occasionally practiced to sell the product at a below cost or lower prices in the market to offload or unload surplus of the commodity without reducing their domestic prices. And dumping is very difficult to check, therefore, certain anti-dumping laws are made as a defense measure to facilitate the trade in the international market. Now, in this context we are now explaining another dimension which is actually very important for our understanding. Now, this is the dimension where we discuss the export subsidies. As I already mentioned, like there are various forms of export control. One, for example, those are exporting some of the important products to other country, to facilitate their trade, the government of their concerned country may give tax relief to the exporters or subsidize their loans or to the foreign buyers even. If foreign buyers are taking loans of the, for example, we take so many raw materials from other countries, raw materials to process it or reprocess and export it to many other countries. Now, in order to purchase the raw materials, the concerned country might do one thing, might facilitate the importers in a various different manner, like the buyer may be given subsidies or a loan to buy those products. Like for example, very recently we may not just simply say that bullet train is received by India, who has given I mean subsidies to us to purchase their bullet train. It is Japanese government, and they have had recession in their banking sector. The interest rate was almost at a very near about 0 and negative rate, and so in order to facilitate their own growth and export simultaneously, they extended those support to Indian economy. So, by which we could able to purchase their product largely. So, therefore, foreign loans are simultaneously very important, which stimulate national exports. This can be can be regarded as a form of dumping as well. Export subsidies, I mean as I told you, reducing prices internationally is possible if you are actually facilitating. For example, you are selling the product in let it be in European countries or England. So, to sell at a low price, our government might give certain discount or certain subsidies on the price of the product. So, lowering the price in the international market is nothing but explained as dumping. Now, export subsidies are therefore illegal by international agreement, and this has been discussed in various forms. Now, one such example here is given Export Import Bank, US government agency that extend the loans to the foreigners at a subsidized rate to finance US exports. So, this is the example given. Now, what here we are mentioning is the following. We are mentioning a diagram which will explain export subsidies very clearly. The here what is important, why export subsidies? It is let us be the case that in the international prices our prices is comparatively higher. So, in order to let it be given the partial equilibrium set off with demand and supply of a particular product, product which is being traded. Now, their country price is at 4. Okay. Now, at 4 they so what is going to happen now? So, export subsidy can largely increase the demand for their product. If the price is at 4, we are giving subsidy so that the price will be little lower at 3.5, and at 3.5 what is important now? We are actually the demand in the international market is actually increasing. Demand in the international market increasing, by which the resultant price is lower as compared to before subsidy. So, the extent of supply also increases, and the demand also increases in the international market, and therefore, since demand increases and the supply increases, there will be less surplus left for the domestic country, and those will be sold. So, export subsidy actually tends to increase the production actually increases, and thereby can able to earn more, capture market. One such numeric example can be explained which will verify the exact or the discussion of export and import and the import quota very clearly. Let us have an example with a demand pattern and supply pattern. A small country like Mauritius, we are now referring to a small country context like Mauritius, is assumed to be unable to affect world prices. So, what are the demand and supply is mentioned here with two equations. It is not affecting world prices. It it imports strawberries at a price $10 per box. Now, a price information for strawberries is given. These are the price and quantity of strawberries. The domestic supply and demand curves are I mean curves for boxes are given with the help of S and D diagram. Assume that Mauritius is completely open to trade. What is the equilibrium price and quantity consumed? So, let us draw the diagram. Now, these are quantity at the time of equilibrium, these and there is a equilibrium price and quantity. So, therefore, we can consider S and Q to be equal at a certain quantity and certain price, all right. So, after solving it, like you can solve like this 60 plus 20 phi is equal to 1160 minus 15 p. So, let us take together 20 plus 15 p for 35 p, okay, which is equal to 1160 minus 60. So, which is roughly around this is 1100. Okay. So, likewise this we can define p. P is here, P is equal to 1100 divided by 35. So, a price can be determined. So, let this be P, the P star which is equal to 1100 divided by 35 and given the demand and supply curve, and this is our Q star. We can convert this P to derive the Q star. After defining the Q and P, we can able to trace. Now, if it is 10, I mean multiply 10, it is 350, multiply 20, it is around 700. So, 3 multiply 3, basically what I am saying, this is around 30. Okay. So, I mean 10 it is 350, 35 into 10 and 20 30. So, around 30 boils down to be 11, I mean this is the equilibrium price. Now, price is said to be 1000, it will be 10 per dollar, I mean dollar per box. If the price is somewhere as 10, what is going to happen? Now, look at this price. Now, here is the demand, here is the supply. Now, you put this 10 on the supply curve, you will get a figure how much is actually supplied, and put this 10 on the demand curve, how much is actually demanded. This gap is actually import, this is called imported amount. So, now first answer can be dealt, how much is imported. Now, consider the effect of an import quota of 400 boxes. Now, here let it be I mean you can find out the quantity and this difference very clearly. Now, if it is only 400, then what happens to the price of strawberry? Now, put this 400. Now, if it is only 400 boxes, what happens to the price of strawberries and quantity consumed? We have already discussed in the previous diagram. If you are restricting into 30 units, then what is going to happen? So, I suggest that you should go through this in our discussion period, especially for explaining the numeric examples. We can find out, also we can find out who wins, who losses based on this example. So, go through and try to work out, or the two can easily be derived. I think this is all about the effects of non-tariff barriers as we discussed, and we will discuss the TBT and especially in the next class. With this, let me close here. Thank you.